You can never imagine how unlucky this beautiful girl with legs almost 180 centimeters long was. Just a moment ago, she was confidently walking into the hospital to visit a patient, her posture graceful. But, in the next second, she staggered out of view on the surveillance camera, walking with an extremely strange gait. When she reappeared 1,000 days later, she was barely clothed, lying naked from the waist down in the hospital's bushes. The date was April 29th, 2016. The location was Heching District, Huaihua, Henan Province. Aunt Liao, a sanitation worker at a top-tier hospital, was doing her regular morning cleaning at around 6 a.m. While passing by some bushes, she stumbled upon a chilling sight. A female corpse, half naked from the waist down, was lying there. Startled, Aunt Liao was terrified. Shortly after, local forensic investigators arrived at the scene. The crime scene was chaotic, with torn clothes scattered everywhere, including items like sunglasses and a denim skirt. The victim's lower body was exposed, her upper clothing pulled up, and her face looked grim and distorted. No personal belongings, such as a wallet or phone, were found that could help identify the victim. The initial forensic examination suggested the victim was a young woman, around 25 years old. Based on the body's decomposition, the time of death was estimated to be within the past 8 hours. Although there were no external injuries, a distinct ligature mark was found on the victim's neck. Given her facial expression and the exposure of her body, police speculated that this was likely a case of rape and murder, with the cause of death being mechanical asphyxiation. However, one thing puzzled the investigators. The crime scene was in a bustling hospital in Huaihua City, where people come and go constantly. It seemed unlikely that the perpetrator could commit such a crime in such a crowded area without being noticed. Could the murderer be someone who was purely deranged and enjoyed the thrill? At that moment, forensic experts noticed a critical detail on the victim's feet. She was barefoot, and her feet were covered in dirt, suggesting that this location was not the primary crime scene. The killer had likely murdered her elsewhere, and then dragged the body to the bushes to assault her. To drag a body into the bushes in broad daylight implied that the first crime scene was not far from where she was found. There should have been traces on the ground. Following this clue, police launched a thorough search of the area. Unfortunately, a heavy downpour the previous night had washed away much of the evidence. Also, the location where the body was dumped was somewhat secluded, beyond the reach of hospital surveillance cameras. Despite having few leads, the police, determined to solve the case, continued to investigate the scene meticulously. Soon, they found a trail hidden under some leaves, leading to a lawn on the hospital grounds, which they believed to be the primary crime scene. However, due to the rain and the large number of patients who had walked over the area, the lawn had been significantly disturbed, leaving no useful clues. With no surveillance footage and no leads on the victim's identity, the case seemed to be shrouded in mystery. Who could the killer be, and why did they choose such a crowded place like a hospital to commit this crime? Was it a sign of moral decay or a twisted psychological motive? To find a breakthrough, the police decided to use the hospital's surveillance footage, working backward to trace the victim's movements before her death. Though the murder site was not covered by cameras, the police believed that expanding the search would eventually reveal her presence. Sure enough, after hours of sifting through footage, investigators spotted a woman resembling the victim. On the morning of the incident, around 8 a.m., a man and a woman were seen walking side by side, appearing very familiar with each other. The woman's body type and clothing closely matched the victim's description. The police soon located the man in the footage, who turned out to be a patient at the hospital. The woman was identified as his sister, Yu, according to her brother, who visited him almost every day while he was hospitalized. That day was no different, but after spending about 2 hours at the hospital, Hu left. As for her whereabouts after leaving, her brother had no idea. After taking blood samples from her family, police confirmed that the victim was indeed Hu. To reconstruct Hu's final movements, the investigators interviewed local businesses near the hospital. Many remembered Hu because her walking style was particularly unusual. She would stagger and sway. Upon reviewing the surveillance footage, the police noticed that Hu's behavior was indeed odd. As a young woman, her walk was not at all graceful or feminine. She moved in a strange, erratic manner, her head swaying from side to side. This peculiar behavior made investigators suspect that Hu might have ingested something toxic, possibly causing her delirious state. After investigating her background, the police discovered that Hu was known for her love of alcohol. When drunk, she would often convulse in the streets. According to her family, her behavior in the video was something they had seen many times before, but she had never been harmed during these episodes. However, this time was tragically different. Hu had disappeared and was found dead. But a new question arose. Hu left the hospital in the morning, yet her time of death was estimated to be around 1 a.m. the next day. Would she have returned to the hospital alone after leaving her brother? The police reconstructed Hu's entire day through fragmented surveillance footage. On the morning of April 28, she left the hospital and returned to her rented apartment in Heching district. Around 3 p.m., Hu, heavily intoxicated, returned to the hospital but did not visit her brother. Instead, she wandered aimlessly around the hospital grounds until 11:40 p.m. That was when she was last seen, near the hospital's cafeteria, appearing sober and walking normally. After that, she disappeared into the bushes, where her body would later be found. Meanwhile, investigators never gave up on searching the crime scene. Although the rain had washed away many clues, they remained convinced that the killer must have left some trace. Expanding their search to within 200 meters of the crime scene, they eventually found a new mobile phone and an ID card belonging to a man named Shi Hui, a 36-year-old local from Huaihua. Could Shi Hui be the killer? If so, why would he leave his ID card at the scene? If he wasn't the killer, why hadn't he returned to look for his lost belongings? As investigators pondered this, forensic experts discovered a male biological sample in Hu's body during the autopsy. This sample matched DNA from a 2003 rape and burglary case in Quanzhou, Fujian. The case had gone unsolved for 13 years due to limited forensic technology and an underdeveloped database at the time. Now, with the two cases connected, police knew that Hu's killer had also been involved in the 2003 case. Suspicion quickly fell on Shi Hui, who had lived in Quanzhou in 2003 and had ample opportunity to commit the earlier crime. Following the 2003 incident, Shi Hui had returned to his hometown in Huaihua. What raised even more suspicion was that, on the night of April 28, Hui had been near the hospital where Hu was murdered, staying there for over 3 hours. With all evidence pointing to Shi Hui, the task force concluded that he was the killer they had been searching for. On May 3, 2015, 4 days later, Shi Hui was apprehended at a local guest house. At the police station, Shi Hui confessed to the crime without hesitation. He did not know who, but he admitted that her death was a result of his impulsiveness. On the night of the murder, Shi had been wandering near the hospital park when it began to rain. He took shelter nearby and dozed off, only to wake up and find that his phone and ID card were missing. Frustrated, he started searching for his belongings and came across Hu was sitting in a pavilion, playing with her phone. Under the dim light, Shi believed that Hu had stolen his phone, as it was the same model as his. He angrily confronted her, accusing her of being a thief. Irritated, asked him if he had any evidence, and the argument escalated. In a fit of rage, she grabbed Hu's hair and strangled her. About 3 minutes later, he realized he had killed her. Panicked, he dragged her body into the bushes, and in a moment of madness, assaulted her. Hui was soon convicted of his crimes and brought to justice, proving that justice, though sometimes delayed, will always be served.